You can't even imagine what it feels like to sit at your own Thanksgiving table, surrounded by the people you love most, and realize you're the punchline of their private joke. I never thought I'd see the day when my own family would laugh at a gift I gave from the heart. But that's exactly what happened. And if you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong. Because the next day, they lost everything I ever gave them, and not a single one of them saw it coming. Before I tell you what was in that box, I want you to do something for me. If you've ever felt unappreciated by your own family, or if you've ever had a moment where you realized you were being taken for granted, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and your voice matters here. Now, let me take you back to that Thanksgiving. The house was full. My daughter, my son, their spouses, my 3 grandkids, even my late wife's sister, who never missed a chance to remind me how things used to be. The air was thick with the smell of turkey and sweet potatoes, laughter echoing off the walls. You'd think it was a picture-perfect holiday. But underneath all that noise, there was something else, a kind of coldness, a distance I couldn't ignore. I'd spent weeks picking out gifts for everyone. It's a tradition I started after my wife passed. She always said, a little surprise at Thanksgiving makes the world feel warmer. So I kept it going, even when it felt like I was the only one who cared. This year, I decided to give something different. Not money, not gadgets, not the usual gift cards. I wanted to give them something meaningful, something that would remind them of what really matters. After dinner, I stood up and cleared my throat. I have a little something for each of you, Bassi, I said, holding up a small box wrapped in gold paper. The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I handed the box to my eldest granddaughter, Emma. She tore off the paper, opened the lid, and pulled out a simple hand-carved wooden heart. I'd made it myself late at night in my workshop, thinking of all the times I'd held her as a baby, all the stories I'd told her about her grandmother. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then she looked at her mother, and they both started to laugh. Not a gentle laugh, not the kind that comes from joy, but a sharp, mocking sound that cut right through me. "What is this supposed to be, Grandpa?" Emma said, holding the heart up like it was some kind of joke. "Is this all you could come up with this year?" The others joined in, passing the heart around, making little comments under their breath. My son's wife whispered, "Maybe next year he'll give us a rock." My daughter rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, you know the kids would rather have something useful." Even my sister-in-law smirked, shaking her head. I felt my face burn with shame. I wanted to disappear. But I didn't say a word. I just sat there, watching as the people I'd loved and cared for my whole life turned my gift into a punchline. I thought about all the times I'd bailed them out, paid for college, helped with down payments, covered medical bills, even paid off credit cards when they got in over their heads. I thought about the vacations, the birthday parties, the Christmas mornings when I played Santa so they could sleep in. I realized in that moment that none of it mattered. Not to them. I excused myself and went out to the porch. The cold November air biting at my skin. I stood there, listening to their laughter drift through the window, and I made a decision. If they couldn't appreciate what I gave from the heart, maybe it was time they learned what it felt like to lose everything they'd ever taken for granted. You might be wondering what I did next. Did I confront them? Did I yell or cry or beg for their respect? No. I did something they never expected. I took back every single thing I'd ever given them, and I did it in a way that made sure they'd never forget the lesson. But before I tell you how, let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you realized your kindness was being mistaken for weakness? What did you do? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our last story about the neighbor who lost everything after betraying a friend, you should watch it after this video. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who need the biggest wake-up call. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my empty house and made a list. Every loan, every gift, every favor, every sacrifice. I wrote it all down, line by line, until the page was full. I looked at that list and realized just how much I'd given and how little I'd ever asked for in return. I decided it was time to stop being the family's safety net. Time to let them stand on their own 2 feet. The next morning, I started making calls. I called the bank and removed my name from my son's mortgage. I called the car dealership and transferred the title of my daughter's SUV back to my own name. I called the college and cancelled the tuition payments for my grandson, who hadn't bothered to thank me once. I even called the credit card companies and told them I would no longer be responsible for any charges made by my family members. You might think I felt guilty, but I didn't. I felt free. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking my life back. I realized that love isn't about giving until you have nothing left. It's about setting boundaries, about teaching the people you care about to value what they have. If you want to know what happened when my family found out, keep watching, because the fallout was bigger than anything I could have imagined, and it changed our family forever. You ever replay a moment in your head so many times, you start to wonder if you imagined it. That's how I felt the next morning, sitting at the kitchen table, the echo of Jessica's laughter still ringing in my ears. I kept thinking about the look on her face when I smiled and asked, "Do you really want to know?" I could tell she wasn't expecting that. She thought I'd shrink away, maybe even apologize for existing. But I was done apologizing. Linda came into the kitchen, her eyes tired. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "Rough night," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm sorry about Jessica," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's been difficult lately." I could hear the guilt in her words, as if my pain was somehow her fault. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's not your job to fix this," I told her, "but I think it's time I did." I spent the day thinking about what I wanted to say. I thought about all the times I'd let Jessica's words slide, all the times I'd let Mark's silence go unchallenged. I thought about the example I was setting for my grandchildren. Was I teaching them to stand up for themselves or to let people walk all over them? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at Jessica, but at myself. That afternoon, I called Mark. I asked him to come over alone. He sounded surprised, maybe even a little nervous. But he agreed. When he arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept either. He sat down at the kitchen table, fidgeting with his keys. "Dad, is everything okay?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Mark, I need to talk to you about last night, about Jessica, about the way things have been." He looked away, his jaw tight. "She didn't mean it," he muttered. "She was just joking." I shook my head. "No, Mark, she wasn't. And even if she was, it's not funny, it's not okay. I've let this go on for too long, and I can't do it anymore." for not defending me. What are you going to do? He finally asked. I smiled, but there was steel in my voice. I'm going to remind Jessica who I am, and I'm going to remind this family what respect looks like. That night, I wrote a letter. Not an angry rant, not a list of grievances, but a simple, honest account of how I felt. I wrote about the pain of being laughed at in my own home, about the years of feeling invisible, about the love I still had for my family, and the boundaries I needed to set. I ended the letter with a question. If you were in my shoes, how would you want to be treated? The next day, I invited everyone over for dinner. This time, I didn't cook. I ordered takeout, set the table, and waited. When they arrived, the tension was thick. Jessica looked smug, Mark looked anxious, the kids were quiet, and Linda tried to keep the peace. I handed Jessica the letter and asked her to read it out loud. She started off confident, but as she read, her voice faltered. By the end, she was silent. No one said a word. I looked around the table and said, I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for respect. If you can't give me that, then maybe it's time we spent some time apart. That night, after everyone left, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. I realized that being a loser isn't about what other people think of you, it's about what you're willing to accept. And I wasn't willing to accept disrespect anymore. You ever notice how the quiet after a storm can feel even heavier than the storm itself? That's how the house felt the morning after I handed Jessica that letter. The silence was thick, almost daring me to break it. Linda moved around the kitchen, careful not to meet my eyes, as if she was afraid of what she might see. I could tell she was worried about the family, about Mark, about what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. I'd said my piece. Now it was up to them. I spent the day in the garden, letting the sun and the dirt clear my head. I kept replaying Jessica's face as she read my words, the way her confidence cracked, the way Mark looked at me like he was seeing his father for the first time in years. I wondered if they'd come back, if they'd try to pretend nothing happened, or if this was the start of something new, something honest. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Dad, can I come over? I told him he was always welcome. When he arrived, he looked tired, but there was a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where we'd had so many hard conversations over the years. Jessica's upset, he said, not looking at me. She says you embarrassed her. She says you made her look bad in front of the kids. I nodded, letting him talk. But I read your letter again. And I think you're right. I haven't been standing up for you. Or for myself. I let things slide because I didn't want to fight. But maybe that's why things got so bad. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the pull between loyalty to his wife and the realization that something had to change. I love Jessica, he said, but I love you too. I don't want to lose my family over this. But I also don't want to keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I put my hand on his. Mark, I don't want to break up your marriage. I just want to be treated with respect. That's all I've ever wanted. And I want you to know it's okay to expect the same for yourself. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'm going to talk to her, really talk, not just about you, but about us. about what kind of family we want to be. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy. I realized that sometimes the only way to heal is to let things break, to let the truth come out, even if it hurts. The next day, Jessica called. Her voice was cold, but there was something else there too. Maybe fear, maybe regret. "I want to talk," she said. "Just you and me." I agreed, knowing this was a conversation we should have had years ago. When she arrived, she didn't waste time. "I'm not used to people standing up to me," she admitted. "I guess I push people to see how far I can go. I'm sorry for what I said. I was out of line." She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since she joined our family. "But you have to understand, I've always felt like I had to prove myself, like I was never good enough." I listened, really listened, and for the first time I saw the person behind the sharp words. "Jessica, you don't have to prove anything to me, but you do have to treat people with respect. That's the only way this family is going to work." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I want to try, for Mark, for the kids, for all of us." That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew I'd done the right thing. And sometimes, that's enough. You ever realize that sometimes the hardest part of standing up for yourself isn't the confrontation, it's what comes after? That's what I learned in the days following my talk with Jessica. The house felt different, like the air had shifted. Linda was quieter, moving through her routines with a kind of cautious hope. Mark called more often, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to talk about nothing at all. But the biggest change was in myself. I felt lighter, as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. But peace never lasts long in a family that's been avoiding the truth. A few days later, Jessica invited us over for dinner. I could tell she was nervous, her voice a little too bright on the phone. Linda and I arrived to find the table set, the kids dressed up, Mark looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Jessica greeted us at the door, her smile genuine but uncertain. Dinner started off awkward, everyone tiptoeing around the elephant in the room, but as the meal went on, something shifted. Jessica asked about my work, about my childhood, even about the first time I met Linda. She listened, really listened, for the first time. The kids chimed in, asking for stories, laughing at old family jokes. Mark reached for Jessica's hand under the table, and I saw a spark of the man he used to be. After dessert, Jessica cleared her throat. "I want to say something," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I've been hard to live with. I know I've said things I shouldn't have. But I want to do better, for Mark, for the kids, for all of us. I'm sorry for what I said at dinner. I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't belong in your own home." The room was silent. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my daughter-in-law, but a woman trying to find her place in a family that hadn't always made it easy. "Thank you, Jessica," I said quietly. "That means more than you know. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." Linda squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes shining with tears. The kids hugged Jessica, and Mark looked at me with gratitude and relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were a family again. Not perfect, but honest. But life has a way of testing you, even when you think you've turned a corner. A week later, Mark lost his job. The news hit him hard. He came over late on night, shoulders slumped, eyes red. "Dad, I don't know what to do," he admitted. "I feel like I've failed everyone." I listened, just like he'd listened to me. "Mark, you're not a failure. You're a man who's going through a hard time. We all do. What matters is how you handle it, how you treat the people around you, and how you ask for help when you need it." Jessica called the next day, her voice shaky. "I'm scared," she confessed. "I don't know how to be strong for Mark. I don't know how to be the wife he needs." I told her the truth. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there. That's what family is for. If you've ever had to rebuild trust after years of hurt, you know it's not a straight line. There are setbacks, doubts, and moments when you wonder if it's worth it. But there are also moments of grace. Moments when you see the people you love trying, really trying, to be better. That night, as I watched Linda and the kids play a board game in the living room, I realized something important. Being called a loser didn't break me. It woke me up. It reminded me that respect is earned, but it's also demanded. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for it. You ever notice how life tests you right after you think you've finally found your footing? That's what happened to us. Mark's job loss sent ripples through the whole family. Suddenly the routines we'd rebuilt felt fragile again. Jessica tried to hold things together, but I could see the cracks, her forced smiles, the way she snapped at the kids, the way she avoided my eyes when she dropped them off at our house. One afternoon, I found Mark sitting on my porch, staring out at the street. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm letting everyone down." I sat beside him, letting the silence stretch. Sometimes words aren't what's needed. Sometimes it's just being there. After a while I said, "You know, Mark, I've lost before. Jobs, friends, even my own sense of purpose. But I always found my way back. Not because I was strong, but because I let people help me. You don't have to do this alone." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I'm scared, Dad. What if I can't find another job? What if Jessica never forgives me for this?" I put my hand on his back. "Jessica's scared too. She's just showing it in her own way. You two need to talk, really talk. Not about blame, but about what you need from each other, and from us." That night, Jessica called. Her voice was raw, stripped of all the bravado I'd come to expect. "I'm sorry for everything," she said. "I know I've been hard on you, on Mark, on everyone. I didn't know how to handle losing control." I listened, letting her words sink in. "Jessica, you don't have to be in control all the time. None of us do. What matters is that you're willing to try, that you're willing to let people in." She was quiet for a long time. "Do you think we'll get through this?" she finally asked. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "I know we will, because for the first time, we're being honest. And that's the only way families survive." The next few weeks were hard. Mark went on interviews, faced rejection after rejection. Jessica picked up extra shifts at work. The kids sensed the tension, clinging to Linda and me whenever they could. But through it all, something new was growing. A sense of unity, of shared struggle. We started having family dinners again, not because everything was perfect, but because we needed each other. One evening, as we sat around the table, Jessica looked at me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on us. I know I made things hard. I know I said things I can't take back. But you never stopped showing up." I looked at her, at Mark, at the kids, and felt a swell of pride. That's what family does. We show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That night, as I watched Mark and Jessica clean up the kitchen together, I realized something had shifted. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were healing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. You ever realize that sometimes the smallest changes are the ones that matter most? That's what I started to see as the weeks went by. Mark still hadn't found a new job, but he was different, more present, more patient with the kids, more open with Jessica. And Jessica, for all her old sharpness, was softer now. She'd started leaving little notes for Mark in his lunch, hugging the kids a little tighter before school, even asking Linda and me for advice about things she used to handle on her own. One Saturday, we all went to the park together. It wasn't anything fancy, just a picnic, a few sandwiches, the kids running wild on the grass. But as I watched Mark and Jessica laugh together, really laugh, I realized how long it had been since I'd seen them like that. Linda squeezed my hand and whispered, "I think we're going to be okay." For the first time, I believed her. But life, as always, had one more test in store. That evening, Mark got a call from a company he'd interviewed with weeks before. They wanted him to come in for a final interview. The whole family held its breath. The next day he went in, suit pressed, nerves jangling. When he came home, he was quiet, almost afraid to hope. But 2 days later, the call came. He got the job. The relief in the house was like a wave breaking. Jessica cried, the kids danced around the living room, Linda baked a cake, and Mark hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered, "for everything, for not letting me give up." That night we had dinner together, just the family, no guests, no drama. Jessica raised her glass and said, "To second chances, and to the man who taught us what real strength looks like." I felt my throat tighten, but I managed to smile. "To family," I said, "to never giving up, even when it feels impossible." That night, as I sat on the porch, listening to the laughter drifting through the open window, I realized something important. Being called a loser didn't define me. What defined me was how I responded. By standing up, by forgiving, by loving my family enough to demand better from all of us. You ever look back and realize the hardest moments were the ones that brought your family closest together? That's what I saw as the days turned into weeks and the new normal settled in. Mark threw himself into his new job, coming home tired but proud. Jessica started volunteering at the kids' school, something she'd never had time or patience for before. The kids seemed lighter too, their laughter filling the house in a way I hadn't heard in years. One evening, after dinner, Mark and Jessica sat with Linda and me on the porch. The air was warm, the sky streaked with the last colors of sunset. Mark cleared his throat, looking at Jessica, then at me. "Dad, I want to say something," he began. "I know things got bad. I know I let you down. But I want you to know I'm grateful for everything, for not giving up on us, for showing me what it means to be a man, even when it's hard." Jessica nodded, her eyes shining. "I'm sorry for the things I said, for the way I treated you. I thought I had to be tough to survive, but I see now that real strength is admitting when you're wrong and asking for help." Linda squeezed my hand, and I felt a wave of emotion I hadn't expected. "We all make mistakes," I said quietly. "What matters is what we do next. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's messy." We sat there in the fading light, the silence comfortable for once. The kids played in the yard, chasing fireflies, their laughter echoing into the night. I realized then that the pain, the arguments, even the harsh words at that dinner table, they'd all led us here. To honesty, to forgiveness, to a kind of closeness I'd almost given up hoping for. That night, as I watched the stars come out, I thought about that dinner, about Jessica's laughter, about the word loser, about the way I'd smiled and asked her if she really wanted to know. I realized now that the answer wasn't about me at all. It was about all of us, about what we choose to do when life calls us out, about whether we let bitterness win or whether we choose to love, even when it's hard. You might think a story like this ends with a single apology, but the truth is healing is a journey, one that keeps unfolding long after the last harsh word is spoken. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything we'd been through, the pain of being laughed at in my own home, the courage it took to stand up for myself, the fear of losing my family, and the relief of seeing us come back together, stronger than before. One afternoon, as I was working in the garden, Jessica came outside, her hands full of lemonade and cookies. She sat beside me on the old wooden bench, the same one where I'd once wondered if I'd ever feel at home in my own family again. "You know," she said, "I used to think being tough meant never letting anyone see you hurt. But you showed me that real strength is being honest, even when it's uncomfortable." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "We all have our moments, Jessica. What matters is what we do with them. I'm proud of you, of Mark, of all of us." She looked at me, her eyes clear. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. I know I made it hard," I said, hook my head. "You made it real, and that's what families are, real, messy, sometimes painful, but always worth fighting for." As the weeks passed, our family found a new rhythm. Mark's job brought new challenges, but he faced them with a confidence I hadn't seen in years. Jessica became a pillar in the community, helping other parents, volunteering, even starting a support group for families going through tough times. The kids thrived, their laughter a constant reminder that love, not perfection, is what makes a home. Linda and I grew closer too. We spent quiet evenings together, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, grateful for the peace we'd fought so hard to find. I realized that being called a loser had been a gift in disguise, a wake-up call that pushed me to demand respect, to set boundaries, and to love myself enough to expect better. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for being part of this journey. Maybe you faced your own family struggles, or maybe you're still searching for a way to heal. Whatever your story, know that you're not alone. There's always hope, even in the darkest moments. And sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing to forgive, to try again, and to keep showing up for the people you love. So, what would you do if someone called you a loser at your own table? Would you walk away, or would you stand your ground? Would you let bitterness win, or would you choose to love even when it's hard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs. And if this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Check out our other videos, especially the one about the grandfather who took back everything after being laughed at by his family. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we live through and the ones we choose to tell.